Welcome to the British Fencing Be You, Be Different podcast. I'm Sophie Devote and I'm here with...
Sean Walton. Nice to see you again.
Hi Sean. Yeah, nice to hear you. And we're here today discussing Be You, Be Different and the name of our podcast in general.
Yeah, it probably should have crossed my mind to ask this question earlier, but why are we called Be You, Be Different?
So I'm very glad you asked that, Sean. It's good that we're discussing this today. It's part of the idea behind this podcast, as we've discussed in the previous episode when we were talking about mental health. We've really tried to open up the world of British fencing and try and create an environment where we can talk about different subjects and talk about what's going on in our world and how it's relevant to other sports and different areas in the world. And really, Be You, Be Different came along because of identifying, we know that fencing is a unique sport. It's not a mainstream sport. I mean, would you agree? I don't think it's a sport that everyone immediately accesses.
Yeah, I mean, I could wish it was different, but that's certainly the truth.
There you go. The word different starts to come in already. So the identification of the people who like to get into fencing can sometimes be from outside of the mainstream, or we're thinking about this alternative kind of way of accessing a sport. It might appeal to people who maybe don't identify as sporty. I know that in personal experience, that was me. I didn't really think of myself as a sporty person, but fencing really appealed to me. There was the other side of it, this feeling of like, when you put that mask on and you become a different person, or you find a different part of yourself. Does that make sense? I don't know if does that sort of ring with you and ring true as well?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think it's true of almost all sports. There's a degree of kind of role playing involved in it. Whether you see yourself as the warrior king when you put your fencing mask on, or something else. I think how you view yourself in the sport is a big part of it.
Absolutely. And I think so for British fencing, wanting to bring people into the sport and to tell them that it's okay to be themselves and to find part of themselves, and then to also become more and to be a better person, or to be a more physically fit person, or a more mentally strong person. So finding the best of yourself and accepting, and it's okay to be a little bit different and to be a little bit outside of the mainstream. So being yourself and being different. And that's really the call. So I think the name of the podcast, just linking that together with British fencing's general call to the world to accept and to be yourself and be different. And we're really wanting to find, a new way to bring sport into people's lives. It's not always just about the drills and the physical fitness. There's so many other social benefits to it. And there's the benefit of going and meeting people and being part of a team. So we've really, really wanted to explore how we find the next generation of different fencers as well. And how can we send this message out to the world and find the best fencers around? So one of the things that we do is we have the athlete development program, and finding the young fencers coming up and through the ranks and becoming the next people who go out into the world and represent GBR. Part of this, you've been interviewing some people as well.
Yeah, we've had a busy time. A lot of interviews in this episode with some really interesting people. We've got some really sharp minds working in the athlete development program and steering it forward. And it's relatively short life. I think it's been running for about 20 months now.
Yeah. And
already a lot of progress in that time, and some very clear ideas on where it's going in the future.
That's right. Yeah, I think in the program there's a sort of glimpse at the future of GBR fence. There's about 180 fencers currently engaged in the program across the three weapons, and aged 15 to 23 right now. So really quite a broad range when you think about ability and future potential there. We're trying to sort of work out, how we can use this program to discover what elements of tactical thought, but also what other skills do we need in order to succeed in fencing. It's not just about an initial result. And I think that's going to be useful for people who are even outside of fencing. Like, what does it take to have longevity in a career? What do you need to do? Should you specialize young? Should you start early, or should you try other things and bring all of these skills together as a person? I spoke to Steve Kemp. He's one of my colleagues at British Fencing, and he was talking to me about the philosophy of the program. And I asked him, how do we even identify? How do we know and how do we find these young people? Do we see their talent emerging early? And here's what he said.
We don't necessarily know when any fencer or athlete in any sport will naturally present themselves as that breakthrough event, and when they really, really show that talent is being recognised and realised. So a lot of this was about actually, let's see how you develop as a person, how that helps you develop in your sport, and then hopefully the opportunity at some point in your journey that you will present at competition, that the quality athlete that you may become. It's not a linear journey. There's not an A to B to C. It is a very, as we all know, it's a very undulating journey, and they use that non-linear word they use quite a lot. So what we're really focusing on is how we create those opportunities for those guys to show their best when it's ready for them, and it's just not predictable that well.
And that's one of the sort of myth-busting things that we wanted to talk about, because I think there is sometimes this sort of idea that, oh, well, you're going to show promise at an early age. I mean, like Tiger Woods, he's 3 years old and everyone goes, oh, he's amazing, so he's obviously going to be a great golfer. But how does that? It doesn't work like that with fencing. It sort of seems to be that they could present later on in life, or maybe just need to be given opportunities. Is that right?
I think there's a lot of evidence that would say it doesn't necessarily present itself in sport. I wouldn't necessarily categorise fencing as anything that's unique about that one in relation to sport.
Yeah, across whole sports.
I would suggest that what we tend to see, we only ever tend to see the ones that do achieve. And then we look at their story, and of course you go, well, he started young, therefore it must have. Interestingly, I was picking up some chat about Harry Kane, where he got kicked out of the Arsenal Academy at 8.
Okay.
Because he wasn't the right size, and he was a late developer.
So he actually found success later in life. It wasn't that he was a bit naughty at 8 years old then.
No, not at all. I mean, he had he's obviously got some high motor function that presented a little bit late in life. So it's always a little bit worrying when we look at the people like Tiger Woods that have always, has achieved, and we follow their backstory. We can look at the Williams sisters that follow their backstory. But if you look a lot closely, there are a number of sports people out there that have followed a different journey. So for every time we find that there is a talent that, has been spotted at a young age, there are probably equally as many talented people, if we really look, that actually didn't present until later life. But we run the risk of actually not looking for them because we get focused on this concept that early specialisation is the way forward.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about early specialisation, because you're saying so you shouldn't really just pursue fencing. You should try different things and discover different things.
I think the first bit is that it's not necessarily a wrong or a right, because if you look at Tiger Woods, obviously he specialised early, right, and he's had great success. We could also argue that he had a slightly different technique, and that technique has now actually caused quite a lot of stresses in his life later on. So you could argue that some of the technical arguments, and it's a model that works. So if you know what you're trying to produce, and you have a very clear vision of what you need as an entry point element of a physical size or shape, etc., etc. If you take rowing, they know, yes, it's a late specialisation sport, but they know that if you've got a certain size and a certain length of arm and certain levers, they can add the bits to you that can give you international success from that point of perspective. So it's not a model that I would necessarily go, it doesn't work. It's a model that works for certain people at certain conditions, and they're more of what I call the 1%.
Right.
The rest of us are 99%. Where we find that actually the evidence is suggesting that playing multiple sports as a young person, and then starting to identify the sport that you really, really love around that sort of 13 to 15 age window, where you really, really start to invest in it. And I think a lot of this for me is where they're developing that physical literacy by playing lots and lots of different sports.
Right, exactly.
They're learning time, distance, how to cooperate with people, how not to cooperate with people, how to deceive and beat people. A lot of their sort of fundamental building blocks are developed by playing multiple games.
Always interesting thoughts from Steve. As I said, he's one of the deep thinkers in our sport about how we progress and what we can do to develop our athletes and coaches and the sport as a whole. And always good to hear his thoughts.
Absolutely.
The interview that I did with the administrative side of the athlete development program was with British Fencing's project officer, Rob Cawdron. As always, he was charming and eloquent, and here's what he had to say. What are the aims of the athlete development program?
So quite simply, our aim is that we want to be better preparing our athletes for high performance through giving them quality experiences and giving them quality training as fencers and also in a wider context as people.
Okay, sounds great. So what does the ADP offer that they can't get from their clubs?
So the main thing that we offer, and this is based on having spoken to fencers before we really got started, was quality sparring. So bringing the best fencers that we can together so that they can challenge each other and improve. Within that, we also encourage it as a space to make mistakes and try stuff. So if you are fencing opponents who you would normally be fencing at a national championships or of a higher standard than you could normally get in your club, this is a place where it's okay to try stuff and fail and learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely an important message for anyone looking to improve, is you've got to get it wrong to get it right.
As well as that, we also keep half an eye. We want to also look at what happens for the coaches, because it's a place for our coaches to come together, share ideas, work collaboratively, because coaching can be quite a lonely profession, and you don't often get a chance to work alongside other like-minded people in such a close and harmonious way.
Yeah.
And then just generally, and then also what we're trying to do more now is ask the fencers what they want to see more of.
Right.
So what sort of slant do they want to start to see on their training that maybe we haven't thought of or that they feel like they need?
Okay, sounds great. So what does an athlete development program camp look like? So, what are the fencers and coaches involved, and what are the different sessions, and is there a different goal for each camp?
Generally, we look at ages 15 to 23, although we have also been looking to bring in older senior fencers, partly to make it more challenging for the sort of top end of juniors and under 23s, but also because it really helps with those guys transitioning up into the senior space so that they get used to having to fence high level senior fencers.
Yeah, that difficult step from juniors into seniors, it's a fraught path for the young fencer making that jump.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the biggest challenges. And then each camp is different. So they're broadly geared around the sort of cadet and junior calendar. So if we take April as our starting point, that's our induction for new fencers into the program. That's their opportunity to come in, get a look at what goes on, but also for the coaches to get a look at them. And we can just start to give people an idea of this is the way that we like to do things. Then in July, we would have our preseason prep. So that's looking at what are you going to do over the start of July? What are you going to do over the summer holidays that's going to get you ready for the start of the season in September? Then we have the start of September, what we'd call sort of the nationals run out. So that's your chance just before cadet and junior national championships. Everyone's come together, have a bit of a fight, see where you're all at, having just finished pre-season. In October is the kickoff for the international circuit, the cadet, the EFC cadet circuit and the Junior World Cup season. So it's a chance to, again, let's get everyone together. Let's get our international spots together and make sure everyone's ready to go abroad and do their thing. We've then got mid-season in December. So that's now looking back at how's your autumn gone? Are you where you want to be? If you are, let's kick on to the second half of the season. If you're not where you want to be, okay, let's look at reassessing and working out what you want to do from here. And so this is where we maybe would start to look at, this is where we'd have one eye on the Europeans and the worlds, particularly for the things that the teams, what's going to be likely the teams. So I think we'd probably have an idea of, maybe 6 to 8 fencers who are likely to be in the frame by that point.
Yeah.
So let's get them fighting together and get them ready and with their focus directly on the major championships. And then finally, we'd have our championship preparation in February and March time.
Okay. So it sounds a very thorough program with, different focuses at different times of the year. So how do you see the ADP developing over, in the future, and how's it changed since the program started?
How it's changed? Well, I think one of the biggest changes we've had has been the number and quality of coaches that have sort of swelled the ranks. So we're now bringing together, good teams of coaches in each weapon, led by Chris Galashlute, Jon Salfield and John Reese. And that's really cool. They're taking the weapons off in the directions that they think they want to go in. And that's something that we didn't have in place sort of 14, 15 months ago. So that's really cool. Looking at where we want to go, short term, I think the big thing, and you talked about it a minute ago, is that step from junior to senior, and what can we do to make that transition not necessarily easier because it's still hard.
Yeah, it's never going to be an easy step, but you can do a lot to prepare the athletes better for that jump.
And so I think one of the things there is about is speaking more with our under 23 fencers, seeing what they feel like they need and what we can do to help them. We've had quite an emphasis on cadet and juniors in the last 18 months, and that's been great, but it'd be nice to start to see be nice to try and get some of the under 23s input more. And then the other thing is about looking at beyond the camps. So the stuff that goes on in the camps, we think is really good. Mm-hmm. And we think it offers a lot of value, and a lot of fencers certainly suggest that it does. But it's about how we can get the stuff that we're doing in the camps, get it out into the community. Yeah. So that we can, that we know that people want to know what's going on. And we know that there is interest from coaches, from fencers, from parents about what's being done on the camps. It's how do we get that out into the community so it can be used by everyone. Mm.
So what are your thoughts on how that will happen?
It's a good question. I think there's looking at where our really strong clubs are in the country and speaking with them and what they think and what they feel like they would need. We're looking to put together something around sort of shared languages for the weapons, because I think across all three weapons, we don't necessarily speak exactly the same language when we're talking to each other.
Yeah, it's true.
And trying to get some kind of even if we're only able to do it at camps, getting some idea of all saying broadly, speaking the same language, saying the same words, just so that we've got some kind of coherent direction for where each of the weapons is going. I think we can do more in terms of publicly available resources, whether that's strength and conditioning, whether that's sports psychology. I think the RFU have got some really cool stuff on their website around like strength and conditioning programs that you can go and basically download off of their website. Mm-hmm. And they're different for different phases of the year and for different things that you want to train. And I think if we could get something like that set up, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a look at, looking at our competitions and saying, right, how do we make the competition experience more meaningful and how do we make that the best it can be? Mm-hmm. But that's a bit more of a medium to long term view, because I don't think we've quite settled on what that idea of meaningful really looks like.
Okay, so lots of good stuff and good progress so far, and lots more exciting stuff still to come. Rob, thanks very much indeed for taking the time to talk to me today, and I look forward to seeing more great stuff coming from the Athlete Development Programme.
Nice one. Thanks very much, Sean. Cheers.
And I think it was interesting to hear Rob's thoughts on where he saw the Athlete Development Programme going over the coming years. And you did an interview with one of the athletes who's been involved in the programme, Alice Campbell.
That's right.
She had a few interesting thoughts as well on what she would like to see the programme offering in the future.
Yeah, I asked Alice very much about her experience of it and the camps, and also what she would like to see, and here's what she said.
So far, I think the camps are great in general, like all the exercises that they do, the warm-ups, the footwork, the scenario fencing, the actual fighting's good. I'd like to maybe see, in the future, maybe some kind of, sports psychologist or a nutritionist maybe come in to speak to us a little bit more, because I feel like that side of fencing is just as important as the actual physical side of fencing. So I think that would be good in the future, maybe.
So that's, as well, part of the camps. I mean, it's also not just about the fencing, but other career paths people can take out of the camps. I'm learning a lot about that from Stuart and the team as well, and discussing different avenues of employment, coaching and things like that. So have you had any experience of learning leadership or teamwork and things around that's not maybe particularly the physical fencing, but something else that is adding to your life as an athlete, as a career?
Yeah, also one of the activities we done in the programme was we had the opportunity to coach one of the fencers, so we put on an actual coaching jacket.
Oh, really? How did it go?
It was quite fun. It was good, and it also gave us tips, because especially where I wouldn't really know how to coach somebody. Like, I know the basics, but I wouldn't know what to say to people or what to do to make them move in a certain way.
Yeah.
But by doing that, you understood it from your coach's perspective. Yeah. So that could help you in the future.
So you had a sort of new appreciation for what it's like to be a coach, even though you're not coaching yet. Do you think that's something that you'd want to do in the future? Are you interested in it at all, or would you prefer to just fence?
Well, for the moment, I'd prefer to fence, but maybe in the future I wouldn't rule out being a coach.
Do you think when you were pretending to be a coach, if you like, do you think that it helped you to understand your fencing more?
Yeah, definitely, because I understand why, like my coach, for example, why he'd move in a certain way, or why he'd say, oh no, do this bit again, or oh no, this needs to be like this. And I understood it from a coaching perspective, as in how your opponent would see it on you.
Yeah.
I see it getting on them.
So one of the things I've learned about the program as well is there's this athlete profile that it's sort of paperwork around your personal journey, and you're planning your future competitions. How is that helping you? How does the athlete profile, is it a way of sort of giving feedback of I need this, I need that? How does that all work?
So there's kind of like, for me, there's two parts to it. So the part where we write down our goals and stuff like that, that's really helpful, because we do know our goals, but it just reinforces them, especially in a training aspect, because our goals are normally like very competition based, like I want to become a good senior fencer, or
I want to be the best
like
fencer in the world.
Yeah, but to do that you do have to meet goals beforehand. So reinforcing them before we actually do the training helps us to really focus the training in. And also the competition aspect, where we write down all the competitions we've got over the year, that helps us to prepare ourselves. So when people are juggling like jobs as well as uni and fencing, it's really helpful, so we can see what competitions we have when we need to be ready for, and we can tailor our training like appropriately. And
you mentioned as well there, like balancing jobs and university and fencing, and that's often so, I think a lot of people apparently sort of drop out of fencing when they have to commit to university or work commitments and things. How are you finding that? Have you got any tips for anyone, or have you had any issues or anything that you struggled with around that?
So I have previously before struggled with workload and fencing at the same time. But as soon as you get your work, you do it. And also if you speak to your schools or your university, so such as my university, I know they can do extensions on deadlines if you're competing abroad and things like that. So the establishments you go to will support you, but you have to go and get the support. They won't just bring it to you.
Absolutely. So it's almost like you have to start taking responsibility for your program and everything. Do you find it stressful? Are you managing that, or is there times when you're like, I've had enough, I can't do this?
At times it is very stressful, especially when it comes to like the exam period. So you have to like tailor your training differently compared to your revision. And
so as well as like normal university life, you've also got fencing going on at the same time. Yeah, that must be a lot.
But in the long run, it's all worth it.
Do you think that the profile that you're building and through the development camp, that's sort of helping keep you organised a little bit?
Definitely. Yeah, it's helping me organise my time more.
And
being more independent.
And Alice mentions as well the balance that these young athletes are having to find in their lives, balancing their work at university or at school. They're going through exam stages. It's really interesting to hear her positive attitude to that. And they're really learning how to go out and find these opportunities themselves. So they're not waiting for someone to bring that to them. And I think that's a great sign of growth and progress in the sort of attitude towards they're taking responsibility of their personal progression, which was great to hear. Another athlete who's balancing her university work and her fencing training is Danielle Lawson. You spoke to Danielle, Sean. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, late night interview, good enough to speak to me over the phone late into the evening, I think after training in her case. And she also talked about the challenge that the athletes fence. I mean, the age group that the ADP is targeted at in the sort of 15 to 23 age group is a time when there's a whole lot going on in their lives, without being involved in high level fencing. So whether it's school exams, university, early steps in your working career, it's a lot to cope with at the best of times, and trying to fit that in around a busy fencing schedule is hard work. But Danny had some interesting things to say about how she balances the two. Danny, welcome to the podcast. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That's an absolute pleasure. So I'm going to dive straight into some questions that I've conjured up for you to get a feel for the athlete's perspective of the athletes the athlete development program. So I wanted to know what you've found particularly useful or interesting about the athlete development program.
Well, currently we're testing something a bit new, and we're practicing more team fencing. So this isn't something that I've particularly done in like talent camps or anything previously, and they're really pushing for training as part of the team, which I'm really enjoying, as I've been pushed into doing senior team competitions already, and I'm absolutely loving it. So it's a great opportunity for us to train with the team and train against the younger juniors and cadets, and even against the boys. So great opportunity we're having at the moment to train as teams. Also, there's access to a variety of coaches, which you wouldn't necessarily get at an individual club. So there's about 5 coaches there on rotation. So it's really nice to get different coaches' perspectives from a training camp. So I'm really enjoying having that aspect to the training at the moment.
Great. I mean, your own coach, John Rees, of course, is the lead epi coach in the athlete development program. So a familiar face as well as some new ideas, perhaps. Being
able to have my coach there and then take all the ideas back to training has made it really easy for me to like get into the training camps well. But I feel that other athletes are really benefiting from having a variety of coaches, both male and female there. It's a good setup. So kind of following on from that, so how did ADP camps fit in with your regular training and fit around your season schedule? They've been organised quite well currently. So we've had one at the Christmas holiday and one at Easter that's coming up. So I've been able to fit it in around my university, and the one in Manchester the other weekend didn't clash with anything. But I know the athletes that have been at the junior and cadet European championships won't be able to go to these trainings. But I feel for other athletes, they've managed them quite well. I know there's so many competitions going on that it's hard to fit around. It's
difficult to find a gap anywhere,
But no, I think they've done pretty well, and they've mixed them around. They've not all been in one location. So they've been in Manchester, Nottingham and London. So yeah, they've definitely done it really well, and I've been able to go to all of them. So I'm really enjoying getting that extra training in that I wouldn't get whilst at university.
Yeah, indeed. So has there been anything that you've found surprising about the ADP camps? Because presumably you've been involved in the athlete development program set up since its inception. Is there anything different about them from what you were expecting?
They're trying to impart some more knowledge into athletes. So it's not just fencing. We've had a variety of people come to talk to us about various different things. So I found really useful that Mary Cohen has come in to talk to us about dual careers, for having that athlete life as well as your academic life, which I'm currently living with the university and fencing. So I found that really useful. And we've also had Lorraine Rose talk to us about anti-doping. So we've had involvement in other areas of career other than just being fencing. So really enjoying it. Yeah.
Excellent. Danny, thanks very much for this high-speed interview late in the evening. Glad you're enjoying the ADP camps. I hope they continue to provide you with something more to further your career now as you head out into the big bad world of senior fencing.
Thank you. Yes, they're really good. And I really recommend that as many athletes go that are invited, because that's the only way that they can improve, is to get more under 23s and more juniors going. So there's a higher level of sparring and attendance.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for doing the promotional advertising as well.
Thank you.
It's great to hear from Danny there. I mean, she's the athlete rep for the programme, and she's very able to sort of tell us what the athletes are experiencing and what they're going through in these camps. There's a big demand on time and commitment, which I think that you'll find with across the board when you do want to start to learn more about any subject. So they rotate the camps that they run around the UK. They run them in Manchester and London and Nottingham. They give the fencers these opportunities for sparring and access to all this extra support and strength and conditioning. So it's great to hear Danny's view on it. And she mentioned coaches there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any fencing program is to a large degree going to be driven by the coaches that are involved.
Yes.
And we've got some great coaches as the weapon leads in the athlete development program, with Chris Gallislut looking after the foil,
That's right.
John Rees the epeists, and Jon Salfield in charge of the sabre squad. And you had a bit of a chat with him early in the morning before a World Cup that he was at.
That's right, I did. It was an early interview. I spoke to Jon Salfield. He was great. He was sharing with a little bit more about the tactical elements, but also his views on the program and the regional development centre he has in Truro. So this is what he had to say to us very early in the morning. Jon Salfield, you're head of sabre with the athlete development camps and the program. And tell me a little bit about that role. Tell us how it is to be a coach in the program.
Yeah, it's quite a multifaceted role, to be honest. And it ranges from organising the programs for camps and delivering coaching at some of the camps, coaching at Junior World Cups, and sort of direct coaching role, but also a lot more theoretical stuff and things we're trying to put in place to help development of coaching and athletes for the long term, not just the immediate short-term performance of existing youngsters on the program. So one of the things that I'm doing is trying to put together what I'm calling the GB sabre style, so a sort of really definitions of how athletes should be looking to fence tactically and what kind of things we're looking for in athletes coming onto the program. So it's partly a guide for fencers and partly a guide for coaches, really. I think one of the issues we have at the performance level in fencing is that we're very good at what we do, but sometimes we're not quite so good at analysing and problem solving. So working out why we haven't won a fight or why we haven't scored a hit, or why, from a simple perspective, why did the fencer fall short in the middle of the piece? So this is really the kind of why things happen and how to make things that you want to happen on the piece. So that's another aspect of the job that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, the sort of day-to-day stuff with, championships and Junior World Cups and those kind of things.
And you mentioned the camps there. How do you use the camps as part of the programme to develop, prepare fencers? What happens on those?
Well, really, we started using exactly what I was just talking about, which is trying to get athletes to understand the slightly more subtle tactical side of the sabre fencing game. So, we have a lot of good athletes. We've got fencers with decent technique, fencers that can move well, fencers that can, hit their opponent. But when they're fencing really high-level opposition, really understanding how to set something up and how to create a reaction or provoke a reaction from the opponent, or how to prepare yourself so you can watch what they're doing and react accordingly. And a lot of the content of the camps that I've been organising has been built around that tactical side and doing tactical workshops. And of course, on the camps, there's a range of athletes. We have fencers coming in as young cadets through to high performance juniors who are winning medals at world level. So it really is a whole range of athletes from the young cadets upwards. So actually we don't just work in one big group. We try and cater groups for, the ability levels and the experience levels of the different fencers as well.
Right. And they are able then to sort of learn from each other's examples and perhaps see what the older athletes are doing and things like that. Do they interact like that?
Yeah, that's right. We have sort of breakdown of groups for the technical side. So we might have a group of athletes that need to improve, for example, footwork technique in order to be able to do a particular preparation with their feet. Or we might have a group of athletes that are technically good enough to do that, so they can go on to using those different types of footwork preparation. And then athletes who are at the very high end of the group who will be looking at using those preparations in a tactical context. But then in terms of overlap between the groups, when we're doing general sparring, when we're doing more fight-based games and those kind of things, there's a big overlap between all those groups. So in terms of direct coach delivery, we try and break it down into groups of experience and ability. And then when it comes to the more interactive stuff, then the younger athletes can interact with the older and more experienced fencers and hopefully learn from them.
Absolutely. You're also at Truro. Truro has a regional development centre. Is that right? Can you tell us a bit more about that? What's it like to lead that?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I'm obviously the lead coach on the development program. I'm also the head coach at Truro Fencing Club, right. And I'm also working with the GB senior team at Senior World Cups and delivering training for the senior squads as well. So I'm kind of working across really from club level through to senior World Cup level, which is quite a challenge. Not just in time management.
You see all of the ranges.
Yeah, absolutely. So not just in terms of time management, but in terms of making sure that I'm doing the right things at the right time with the right people. But the Truro Fencing Club, obviously, as many of the listeners will know, has got a long history of producing good sabre fencers, going back sort of 15 years or so. And I took over as head coach there in 2007, and we put in place our high performance program, which has produced a lot of good young athletes. Many of the fencers are in the senior squad and senior team now, and junior World Cup team and squad as well are from that high performance centre. And recently that's become, if you like, linked into the development program as a regional development centre. So we're doing at the moment a pilot of doing physio screening and strength conditioning screenings and delivery in order to try and track the incidence of injury, particularly around the hamstring and ankle areas, which are the primary injuries that we tend to find in sabreurs.
Right.
So we're looking at, can we actually reduce the amount and the frequency of injuries in young sabre fencers by delivering physio screenings to prehab, as we call it, so identify possible injury risk, and then strengthen up those areas by delivering a good S&C program to those fencers. So that's one of the relationships we've got with the development program through Truro Fencing Club.
That's great. And injury prevention is definitely even outside of fencing and throughout the sports world and even into performing arts world. It's that the research that comes in to help people to avoid injury is probably really going to be beneficial for a lot of people. As an amateur sabreur, Jon, have you got any advice for me? And can I have a lesson one day, maybe?
We can definitely do a lesson, no problem at all. Yeah, my advice to every sabreur is land all your attacks and don't counterattack too much. That's number one.
Attack.
And number two would be take your time. It's very easy in sabre to think it's, as some of my old friends who'll be listening will know, wiggle, 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 slash, slash, slash is a kind of, sabre caricature. But actually the very best sabre fencers will take their time, not only in between hits, but during their preparation of their hit. So take your time, don't counterattack too much, land all your attacks, and then you'll win.
That's great. Thanks so much, Jon. That's good advice. I'm going to think about that in a metaphor for life as well. Take your time and try and attack sometimes.
Land all your attacks.
Land all your attacks, yeah.
Always interesting to hear from Jon, sounding a little husky there early in the morning. But I thought it was really interesting to hear what he had to say about developing a national style for British sabre. We, in the past, have been a sort of mongrel collection of fencers to some degree, whereas a lot of other nations have an identifiable style, which makes it much easier for them to develop their fencers across the country, because it's a kind of universal understanding of what they're heading towards. And I'll be really interested to see that developing over the coming years to have an identifiably successful British style appearing on the international stage.
Absolutely. And he was it was great to hear it from him, because he's developing this style, but then he's also able to share how they are all fencing at different age groups and how that changes and that attitude changes. It takes me back to when I was talking to Steve Kemp, and he was describing, of course, we don't know what the talent is that's going to present itself. It might present itself later on. So to have an eye out across the generations for this new wave of success is really a great thing to hear. And I think when we're looking at this generation of fencers who, okay, they're learning, they're growing through the ranks, but then where does it go? Is it all about getting to that medal podium? Or when we look back, have we actually created better people? Have they got career opportunities? Do they know more about themselves? Have they become more aware in a tactical level, not just for their fencing, but as a person? And it's just great to hear that this program is looking at that wider part. And it goes right back to what we were saying, be you, be different, make better people, not just better fencers. And hopefully that does lead all the way to success. And after our interview, Steve was telling me, it's not that we don't want to win. This is about winning. We do want to win, but we want to win in a way that's actually created a new generation and a new wave, this cultural shift of an educated way of creating new fencers. And Steve was great. And he finished off with a little word about success and what does that mean to different people.
And if we can create people that love what they do, then some of them, they will find their measures of winning. They will find their measures of success. For some of them, they will be like Richard, that will achieve that world number one status. For some of them, actually, do you know what? Sometimes I call it the earning your beer. You've gone and had a great time and you go and sit down and you have a drink and you reflect on it. You know, you've worked hard and you've enjoyed yourself. Well, isn't that success as well?
This episode of Be You, Be Different is brought to you by Pulse Roll. They produce vibrating foam rollers and products that help athletes strengthen, prepare, and recover faster, which is really important if you're training and have to fight the next day with sore muscles. Take a look at their website, pulseroll.com. You can use the discount code BF20 to save at their website. Thanks, Pulse Roll.